Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Shamir Sajdev, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML podcast. Today we're joined by Ian Roberts, Marketing Director, Direct Acquisition at Vitality. Ian, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, good to be here.
Let's just jump straight into it. It'd be great if you could just share a bit more about yourself and your journey so far.
25 years getting on, financial services marketing, so one sector but many different roles. Everything from marketing strategy through to sort of leading planning teams, and then sort of latterly leading comms and trading teams. So I've done that largely blue chip organisations, so Aviva, Lloyds Banking Group, Legal & General, and firstly Prudential. So weirdly, given Vitality started as a Prudential idea, I've sort of come full circle, which is interesting. And I'm currently, as I say, at Vitality, so look after all things direct-to-consumer and direct-to-business acquisition across our health insurance and life insurance businesses.
Amazing. So for those who perhaps haven't heard of Vitality, it'd be great if you could just share more about sort of who they are, what they do as a business, and a little bit more about your role. Feel free to expand.
Vitality is very much a purpose-led insurer, so only 10 years old this year, deliver solutions for customers across both consumer health, so health insurance, so private medical, if you like, business health insurance, so supporting particularly sort of one-man bands and 0 to 9 employees in the business healthcare sector, and life insurance, so protecting what's most important to people should they pass away, get seriously ill, etc. So that's our core business. And as I say, very much purpose-led and founder-led. So we still have the founders of the business leading the company overall. And that obviously gives a very much sort of agile, founder-led mindset in terms of everything we do. So my role in that is looking after all things direct to consumer and direct to business acquisition. So getting new business in the door through our marketing channels. I have a small but perfectly formed team who look after broadly three things. So brand and above the line activity. So the AV plan, TV, video on demand, broadcast sponsorship, sort of brand building more generally in the sort of digital space. A digital trading team. So the guys really cranking the handle to deliver the numbers across predominantly paid search, but increasingly social, display, and sort of associated ad tech as well in that space. And then finally, a team looking after our own space. So SEO, conversion rate optimization, and making sure that our website is humming really in terms of delivering that conversion from initial interest into a sale at the back end.
Full spectrum then under your remit. But before we sort of jump into, I suppose, the almost sort of like the nitty gritty and under the hood type stuff, kind of want to talk about sort of Vitality's journey. You mentioned obviously you're only 10 years old, which is very, very young in the grand scheme of things. But obviously in the last 10 years, it's the case that Vitality is a very, very well-known brand. One could definitely say it's a household name. It'd be great to kind of understand what that journey looked like for you and your team. And how did sort of marketing activities sort of start off and kind of where are you now? And then also, I suppose, what channels did you prioritize and how did you make those decisions?
Vitality is very much a business with a really clear purpose. So compared to other places I've worked, just as an example, I mean, I stepped in the door day one, and I've been here 3 years now. Day one was an induction. It was an induction session that spent half a day talking about Vitality's values. And, arguably there are other businesses I've worked where the values are something you talk about twice a year in terms of your reviews. Vitality, that has those values at the front and center of everything we do. Literally every conversation has comes back to those values and ultimately the purpose. So our purpose is to make people healthier and enhance and protect their lives. So, the why of what we do is super clear and central. And that's driven the comms, that's driven the activity in terms of the creative and the brand. And ultimately what we're trying to do certainly through what we do in marketing, but as a result of that business purpose, is to drive positive behavioural change amongst people that engage with us and our products, and ultimately the Vitality programme that is central to that. So it's very much a challenger brand, and certainly the mindset is still very challenger. Our aim continues to be to sort of disrupt what is arguably a pretty stagnant insurance industry. We look to point the finger and prod a bit at this obsession with sort of covering the worst, as opposed to actually celebrating the more positive aspects of becoming healthier and the sort of impact that can have on people's lives. So, in terms of our relevance, I guess, over those 10 years, it's only increased. So if you think of post-COVID, certainly, but context of challenges in the NHS, rising obesity levels, increasing cancer cases, growing mental health challenges, particularly among the sort of younger audiences, it's actually how do we help people make positive steps to either protect themselves against that or get over things like that. So in terms of our comms, we started very much sort of sport-led, and we had elite athletes as ambassadors like Dame Jess Ennis-Hill and Maro Toji now. And over time, we've realised that people don't want to necessarily become an elite athlete. What they want to do is do a few more steps each day, or maybe just become a little bit more active in their day-to-day life. So it's about shifting our creative and shifting our comms to a place which recognises that, but continues to disrupt in that thats space. So over 10 years, we've shifted the conversation. We've shifted it from sickness and death to healthy living. We've become the third largest health insurer in doing that, which if you'd asked us 10 years ago, we'd have taken that. We've steadily grown our market share in life as well. And we've sort of done that with, as the creative director says, a tin of pink paint and a Dachshund dog called Stanley. Now, again, if you'd sort of told us that was going to be the successful ingredient in all of our advertising 10 years ago, I think we'd have been surprised, is the short answer.
One thing you said was really interesting, and it sort of just rings a bell. And it's that shift from talking about sort of death and kind of all the losses associated with that to that move to speaking about sort of healthy living. Do you think that change in messaging was something that you sort of organically came about? Or do you think it was more a case of responding to the market in terms of, I suppose, when social media's had a big impact on this now, isn't it? If you look at sort of the general sort of climate and culture at the moment, nightclubs are dying down, young people are hanging more around at gyms. It'd be interesting to kind of understand, the piece around that. Was any research involved and kind of what happened there?
It was definitely an evolution. We're 10 years old, like you said, so sort of evolution, take that with a pinch of salt. It's been pretty quick. But I think what we've done is find more of a balance. When we started it, it was very much, aspirational, I think, in the way that we communicated the proposition. Look at these elite athletes, look at what you could achieve, look at the rewards that we can give you as part of the insurance. As the market has changed, and I think a key point in terms of the insight was, from a consumer perspective, we reached a point where consumers were no longer interested in cashback or a free coffee, or yes, it was nice, but it wasn't any longer the core of what they were looking for. What they were looking for was certainty as a start point, particularly on the health side, in the face of long waiting lists at the NHS, and difficulty getting GP appointments and slow service and stuff like that. And because it was certainty that they were looking for, that was translating into trust, and trust meant you'd been around for a long time. So suddenly we were losing out to the incumbents like the Boopers and the AXAs of this world, and Aviva, etc., because people were associating trust and certainty with, well, you've been around. So we had to pivot, and we had to find a different way of communicating our difference that wasn't just about rewards, or it wasn't just about the elite athletes. And ultimately, our previous campaign, or where we've been for a long time, was this idea of sharing the benefits of healthy living. So what was good for a member in terms of their health and well-being was good for us as a business, because you had people claim less and it cost us less money, and was ultimately good for the community as a whole, because you weren't putting sort of more people through the NHS. So that was always our sort of how we played our purpose out in comms, but that wasn't cutting through anymore because the world had changed, and the insight was that's not what we're looking for anymore. So, and a bit of well-being washing, I think, amongst competitors wasn't helpful either. So we had to shift, and we shifted mindset-wise from some sort of a focus on activity to getting you healthier, because that was less sort of prescriptive, if you like. It was whatever start point you were, here's where you could go next. A shift from rewards to protecting your future. So again, slightly more ethereal, but no less tangible in terms of how we could help. And then a shift from different, because increasingly we weren't, and your insight was saying you're the same in the places we care about, you're different in the stuff we don't, to a place of actually we're ahead of everybody else, we're ahead of the curve. A phrase we use internally is next generation insurer. So it's about how are we looking ahead, how are we future proofing, and how are we meeting those changing needs of consumers as the world changes around us. So I think that's the evolution in the comms. Certainly we've gone from challenging with a sort of a healthy living angle to I guess a championing with proactive protection. So how can we as an insurer help you live longer is the bottom line.
Is that sort of the premise of your more recent campaign? I think it's move forward with vitality. Is that what sort of underpins that?
Exactly that. That campaign really was what came out of that very definite shift in both the insight and also in how we believed we needed to evolve and we needed to move on. I think it was a difficult conversation, because ultimately, as a business, we've seen growth year on year on year for the 10 years. We continue to grow. And so to have a conversation with the board which says we're going to fundamentally change our campaign at a point where we are seemingly pretty successful, obviously raised some eyebrows. And not only that, it was a fundamental change to the role of Stanley, the dachshund, in that. So up until the new campaign, he'd always been the detractor. He was the one sitting on the sofa going, "Oh, you don't want to do that," and there was this sort of counterpoint, if you like, in the comms. And we changed his role completely to suddenly become the embodiment of everything Vitality stood for. This idea of moving forward, as the campaign title suggests, this next generation insurer, this constant movement and activity. And weirdly, that was the thing people got hung up on most. That was what created the biggest concern, was this change in role of our mascot, if you like. And he was going from very much a sidekick role to a hero. He'd gone from cynical to being charming and the face of the ad, detractor to champion, a sort of just a mascot to actually the real life behind the ad. So it was very much through Stanley and then through the creative as a whole, how did we evolve and sort of feel like we were responding to that shift in consumer insight, certainly.
I'm interested in that difficult conversation with the board, actually. A lot of our listeners are going to be CMOs, senior marketing individuals. At some point, every senior marketer has had that moment when they've kind of had to go, okay, right, everything's running quite smoothly here, but if we want to get to the next level, if we want to take it up a notch, hey, we're going to have to do something different here. And it's always a difficult conversation to have. That shift, that change, was that the marketing team? Was that born from the marketing team, sort of championing that, or was it serviced that in a different area, from the data team or whatever it is, and then did the marketing team then end up championing it for them, or how did that sort of come about? And then how did that conversation go? How did you approach that?
It was definitely led from the marketing team, so it was very much a shift in the comms strategy and the comms framework that sat around that. It wasn't being driven by a particular business need. We had stretching targets. We had done year on year for the previous 9. So that wasn't anything new. There was a sort of intuitive feeling within the marketing team that we needed something slightly new and different. And that could have gone a number of different ways. That could have been I just brought on a new media agency. So we now have a media agency called Walking Media, who, are independent. They're very innovative. They're much more fleet of foot than we were used to, and fit really nicely with the Vitality mindset. So it's sort of, having come off a successful tender process for them, it would have been very easy to go, we just need a new creative agency. And actually that wasn't the answer. I mean, Snap VCCP have been with us for the whole journey, and they were like, actually, can we have a go? We want to evolve and transform the campaign because we believe that's what you need. And so really the conversation with the CEO and ultimately the board was one of, it's not that the old campaign's worn out, it's just it needs a refresh. So in terms of our brand identity, in terms of everything we stand for, that will continue to run through. But we need to create clear water again between ourselves and our competitors. So we very much see ourselves owning this sort of positive behavioural change, the well-being space, if you like. If you look across our competitor set, a large number of them talk a great game. And what we have and what we are unique in having is the Vitality Programme and all of the data that sits within that in terms of the science that says by becoming more active, you can put years on your life as a very high level somewhere. And none of our competitors have that because they don't have the programme. So it's actually about how could we double down on that insight from our own data, coupled with the insight from consumers that, they're less interested in the faddy stuff, in the sort of quick return. Actually, this is important. How do we get that across? And that was the conversation with the board. And ultimately, it was also coupled with the challenge that the new media agency had given us, which was this idea of where we were, sort of 24 months ago, was bursts of campaign activity, right? So it was pick an idea, pick an ad, build ad, put it out, spend a load of money behind it, and then go quiet again while you did the same thing. And actually we have shifted, and the commitment to the board was to shift away from that and to be in front of consumers pretty much 12 months of the year in some shape or form. And the argument for that was, to really embed our purpose again, so double down on delivering that purpose to market, getting consumers really clear on what we stood for and why they should care, ultimately, building on the awareness that we knew we had, but with a story, because we knew, particularly with a sort of background in sponsorship, people identified the pink, and if we were lucky, they identified the logo and didn't think it was yogurt. They thought it was insurance. Beyond that, they couldn't really tell us who we were and what we stood for. How could you evolve the campaign in order to build on that awareness and tell your story? And that was the commitment to board. We do that through Always On, we do that through evolving the campaign, and then also we do that through some sort of pretty progressive measurement and data usage that we really hadn't delivered sort of up until that point.
I want to jump into the data stuff, but before we do, I want to talk about sort of always on activity and what does that look like? I mean, you're the perfect person to answer it because obviously you're looking after the entire sort of marketing stack there. Is it a case that you kind of got a gentle hum of kind of like the search social stuff kind of going on and then you layer on sort of TV or other bits and pieces on it? Be great to kind of understand, almost like from a media planning perspective, how you're approaching that.
I'm a great believer in filling the funnel top to bottom and creating those connected journeys from a consumer point of view. So where Vitality had been was sponsorship for awareness, TV and paid search for trading, which seems slightly random, I get, but we had a term internally called brand response, which was one I was keen to try and change, but ultimately the TV ad had to do everything. So it was a bit of brand and it was a CTA call to action, and it had to deliver the numbers. And as a business, because we were young and because growth was absolutely the priority, everything came back to in-month targets and ultimately in quarter and in year. So it led us to a place where the media plan reflected the thinking. Sponsorship was an accepted cost that delivered awareness, and it genuinely did as well. We've seen awareness grow significantly over those 10 years. But everything else was about delivering sales. For me, Always On was about two things. One, an ability to fill the funnel top to bottom and start to create some of those connected journeys, and therefore still be able to deliver the numbers. And the second thing was to be able to shift the role, particularly of the AV staff, into a place where we were driving brand KPIs, not trading KPIs. That's not to say it didn't have an impact, but to badge them very separately. And so actually Always On started as how can we get to a place where we are always on TV? Now, it's not always on at the same weight, but we are always on. So we will have seasonal peaks and troughs, both from a sales plan perspective, but also from a sort of demand perspective. And we reflect those, but we will always be on TV week on week on week for the whole year now. And that's different lengths and different types. But as part of this campaign, we moved from build an ad and then advertise said ad, and then build a new one and advertise that, to a place where we now have a suite of ads. So I can toggle between those ads at different points in time. And those ads are both different creatives, so we have about 4 or 5, and different lengths, so 30, 20, 10s. I mean, we use them in different ways. But as a result, we can be always on and reasonably efficiently. There's then a continue to trade. So part of Always On was expanding from just being always on search to using and testing actually other channels. So we did a lot of testing in the social space. We used different display partners to test there. We built an affiliates program. So again, Always On became more broad in terms of our media mix. And then there was the messy middle. So just didn't play in that space until the last 12 months, and still haven't cracked it, I think it's fair to say. But it's, what is the role of social in that mid funnel rather than in the trading space? How do you measure it? What does engagement look like? But more importantly, what value can you put against it? How do you connect? And do you even need to? But how do you connect AV into your trading digital channels? So all those are sort of questions the team and I are grappling with. I think we haven't solved it. We've done a lot of testing. There's a lot of testing to come. But just as a mindset, this idea of being present all of the time at different weights and different channels is something that's been accepted ultimately, and now we can measure the value of, which is great.
You mentioned obviously you've all got TV on in terms of, you've got peaks and troughs, etc. You're weighting up as, throughout the year. How forward are you planning your media buying? Are you booking your budget sort of for the year ahead, and then you're buying media sort of quarter to quarter, or you're pretty much buying it out the year ahead, and you kind of know what you're going to be doing next year, May, for example?
Nearer the former than the latter. It's pretty reactive, if I'm honest. So we obviously have a shape, and we set some pretty clear guide rails around what we're trying to achieve, the KPIs we're trying to influence, and that is largely in year. But for brand, increasingly beyond that, so 1 to 2 to 3 years. In terms of working with a media agency, again, the benefit of them being more independent is that their buying methodology allows us that little bit more reactivity. So in the AV space, we're buying really a month to 6 weeks ahead, and still getting the efficiency of those buys. We're not tied to particular channels. There aren't bulk buys happening quarters in advance. It's we're genuinely making the right buying choices for the target audience and for what we see is working and not working month by month. Just as an example, one of the things we just finished doing, which I think is a first, certainly within the FS space, is we've done some Sky work, so work with Sky to match our member data against their member data. So what we can start to see is what our members are watching, where they are watching it through a Sky box. And that's given us some really interesting insight. Whereas we were buying purely on channel performance before, we can now overlay lookalike models to say, well, actually, our life members look really different to our health members. And we know they're watching really different stuff. So how do we start to pull those apart in terms of how we target and how we deliver our media? So that sort of reactive planning allows us to do that sort of thing in terms of testing. And then in terms of, more broadly, we're looking at a shape in year, and that shape is defined by the business targets that I'm on the hook with my opposite number in sales to deliver. But from a media point of view, we can be much more fleet of foot. So we can change direction once we see stuff isn't working. So example this week within the Google estate is we've reasonably recently moved into broad match in addition to our exact match campaign on the health side. For some reason, there have been some issues in the broad match account. And therefore we say, well, okay, hold on, we've still got a target to hit, but we're running really short. How do we move some of that money around? So within a day, we've moved money between demand gen and PMAX and broad match, and you can make decisions on the fly. And we've got an agency set up that allows us to do that. And likewise, we could, if we wanted to change some of our TV buying, but yeah, it's slightly less effective to do it that way.
Was it Jeff Bezos that said it? I can't remember who. Fixed on the outcome, flexible on the methodology. I'm a big fan of that approach because I think you can't get entrenched in channels or messages just because that's what you wrote on the spreadsheet. You know, if it's not working, if it's not delivering, then it needs to be changed. Equally as well, though, you've got to balance out making sure you've got the commitment to the budget from the board or the stakeholders at the same time as well, because suddenly if that gap in the spreadsheet, or there's suddenly a gap in the spreadsheet, that money finds, you know, another pocket to go in, right?
Budget's a really interesting one. So that what you describe is exactly what I was used to as I stepped into Vitality. So you step into your marketing year with a budget and a target within your trading team, and you work to that and you deliver as much as you can for that money, basically. Vitality is slightly different. So we work to a cost per sale, basically. I'm sure the CFO would disagree, but theoretically, I have infinite amount of money as long as I'm hitting that cost per sale. And that sounds great in that, I could do anything. But what you're trying to do the whole time is predict what the next sale is going to cost you. Because it's outside, it's above that cost per sale, suddenly you're in deficit and you're scrambling to claw that efficiency back. If it's below, you've got headroom, so you want to rapidly stick some more into whatever channel you're talking. So it's a really different way of thinking from what I was used to. I'm sort of more in the rhythm of it now, but it does lead to some really interesting conversations about certainly channel trade-offs, because we will measure all of our channel efficiency relative to that cost per sale and a cost per lead target. And at the point at which it starts getting expensive in one, we can then move it to another. And likewise, we're sort of getting to a place where we can do something really similar in the above the line channels as well, particularly if they're digital. So it does put a different spin on how you're planning. And actually, my challenge is, how do we as a team not just react? How do you put more structure around it? How do you make sure that you're hitting your longer term KPIs and your longer term objectives? Because it is so possible to react to every day or every hour of what's happening.
Prior to running the agency, I was marketing director of a trading platform, and we were the other way around. I had a similar thing. I could pretty much have infinite budget. We had a cost of acquisition target. So as long as I was sort of in and around that, I could pretty much just keep on going. And the only thing that would ever stop us really is a genuine cash flow issue in terms of the business. And I don't mean a cash flow issue as in, we can't afford to make payroll. I mean, a cash flow issue is in, they can't give me that next couple of $100,000 for whatever reason, because it's a genuine business. I've hit the upper limit. I finally found the ceiling here in terms of what the business can actually spend. And I think that methodology, is, like you said, it's a lot easier with online, right? Because then you can just start doubling down in the areas until you kind of hit some sort of capacity or whatever. But you can kind of keep on going all day long. And then, but now I suppose, going back to sort of the TV AV stuff, with the more sort of programmatic style purchasing of TV, so CTV and kind of all of those sorts of things, actually it's made that a lot easier, because then you can then start doing geographies and all sorts of stuff with that, right? So it actually makes it really, really interesting. But I suppose the key difference being is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I suspect the TV stuff is slightly more, the time to measure the payback period is probably a lot longer than the digital stuff. So you've got to be a little bit more patient with that, I suspect.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, so we have, as I'm sure many others do, different methodologies through third parties that allows us to put a response rate against TV. I'm always slightly reticent to do it, in that predominantly as a natural go-to mindset, Vitality is looking at those shorter term trading numbers. So as soon as you put a response rate on TV, unsurprisingly, people are picking your response rate apart, and it's not about that. So you're right. Payback is very much, and we're just really starting to understand it in the last 6 months or so off the back of a campaign. It's certainly longer term. It certainly is about almost not an invisible, but less tangible base sales rather than the incremental ones that are easier to measure. And therefore, a lot of the battle in terms of selling in, if you like, so back to the board conversation, the longer term build sort of KPIs, particularly around the AV, is Well, you won't see it for 6 months, but it is there. And actually, we'll start the benefit of it 6 months after that, maybe. So, yeah, we're a year off the investment, and you've sort of got to just believe me that it's working. And there are stuff we can point out, like branded search metrics, and some of the MMM stuff starts to sort of expose that. But it's quite a leap of faith, and that's been one of the challenges, I think, in terms of that measurement space.
We run into fundamentally the same thing when it comes to influencer marketing, right? Because it's frustratingly because it's online. I think TV gets a bit more forgiveness, but because influencers are online, the first question we'll run into is, well, how do we, measure conversion rates and what can we expect the CPA to be? And that's when I have to say to them, well, look, it is a lot more like TV in terms of a brand awareness play. It's going to give you that halo. It's going to create brand salience. Yeah, you're not going to get the ROI on it. You put an insertion in on a Monday, you're not going to see it on a Tuesday. You've got to create some sort of relationship with that audience. And I think, like, if I compare sort of financial services to other sectors, I think other sectors like fashion, for example, they're very, very aware of it. They know the impact. They know the importance of it. It's now part of their marketing mix. I think financial services, fintech, is a little bit behind, and they're still kind of getting to grips with it. There's a few brands that I think they've taken that leap of faith and they've doubled down on it, and they're comfortable with it. But I think as a whole, not so much. I think we're still a good few years away from that.
Yeah, and we're up there. Yeah, influencer marketing is on the list. Yeah, I'm not sure quite. We haven't quite worked out where to start. Is the short answer? And we also have a bunch of ambassadors within the business. So the Maro Tojis, Ellie Simmons, Jess Ennis-Hill, people like that. So there's this slight conflict's a bit of a strong word, but you know what I mean, in terms of we've got these people who theoretically are well-known faces and therefore would sit in an influencer bucket, but actually they're not influencers.
Yeah.
In the way that we now understand them in the social space in particular. So it's how do you sort of marry those two things together, or should you? Yeah. So
I would say it's a fine line between sort of brand ambassador and influencer, isn't it? Is it a fine line or is it more for Venn diagram? Do you know what I mean? There's some that sort of kind of crossover. I kind of mentioned I didn't want to touch upon the data stuff before we sort of wrap up. It'd be great to kind of understand, I think, the importance of data in your decision making as marketing director, but then also as a marketing team as whole, and then also understanding that balance between being data led and then being sort of creative led as well at the same time. So, yeah, it'd be great to kind of get your insights on that.
So I think as a business, we are awash with data, and I had a similar experience in at Lloyds, for example, because of the amount of data we have about members, because of the Vitality program, because of the products that we sell, in Lloyds, for example, the amount of current account data and associated stuff. So data isn't the issue. We've also got an ad tech stack, which we've built over time, which does present slightly different challenges, but it does mean we've got data flows between the various platforms and our own back-end systems, and we use BigQuery in between to sort of try and make sense of it all. There's a load of data. In my role, I often struggle with is there's a limited amount of insight. And actually, that if we could have as much insight as we do data, then I'd be laughing. And I'm not necessarily, by trade anyway, a data expert, but have learned over the years that working with it is super important. But what I want to be able to do is make better decisions as a result. And that is the bit which is a constant challenge. So are we in a better place as a team? Absolutely. So our data is far more connected. We are making better in-day and in-week decisions with certainly the digital data sets that we have. We have an analytics team that's really supportive in terms of building dashboards and insights from that data. Can I make better decisions? And actually, before I get into that, and we now have a media mix model that we didn't have 2 years ago that not only do we have, but we actively use in our planning, and we use it with media agencies. So we're in a pretty good place. There's a long way to go. And I think there's a long way to go before I can get to a point which says our ad tech and our measurement planning and strategy is connected. I think that's a big next step, the next 12 months. I can make really informed decisions about where I place my next pound. And I also know whether that pound is going to drive greater value over the long term or the shorter term. If I could answer that question as well, then I'd be in a much better place. Yeah, in terms of how it's used, it's making it more specific. I think at the moment we use it for trend and we use it for making optimization decisions. It's not necessarily driving those big questions or the big answers. And I think that's the step change over the next 6 to 12 months.
You sort of just given us sort of a brief outlook in terms of sort of some of the things you want to achieve with Vitality over the next year or so. But before I sort of ask you to expand on that, one question I did want to ask you is that for perhaps not aspiring marketers per se, but aspiring brands is probably better, I think, in terms of positioning it, that they're looking to sort of drive growth within their organisations. What advice would you give, if you sort of could give them there's no silver bullets, but if you could give them sort of, a few silver bullets, what would they be?
Yeah, there aren't any, but if you could give them some, yeah. So I think certainly with my Vitality hat on, the thing that's really resonated with me over the last 3 years has been staying true to your purpose. That purpose genuinely anchors all of the comms planning and all of ultimately the creative delivery. And without it, I think, particularly in a business that moves at the pace that we do, you could run the risk of ending up being very scattergun. So I think anchoring yourself in what that purpose is, the sort of Simon Sinek why, is super important. And I've only really come to appreciate that properly over the last 2 or 3 years. So I think that would be one. I mean, it's a well-used phrase, but the other thing is the sort of the fail fast. So if at all possible, learn from the mistakes, learn from them really quick, start, stop, continue, the usual stuff. But I mean, we've had a number of, certainly both as a business overall, big decisions, but also within my team in terms of the media we're using, some of the testing we've done. And it's just having the confidence to go, no, let's stop that. And you can come back to it. And value-based bidding within Google is an example on the life side. We're probably on our 4th or 5th test of that now. And for various reasons, the other 4 just didn't quite work. It was either a time thing, either the data wasn't quite right or the model wasn't quite right. And rather than run it for 6 months and then look back and go, yeah, that was a bit rubbish, we gave it the 2 weeks learning, we left it a couple of weeks, it still wasn't working, we stopped it. And we said, we'll park that and we'll come back to it. And I think that's paid real dividends, particularly with efficiency hat on. And then I think the third bit, weirdly, given all of our conversation about data just now, but it's really important to embrace the data. And I really enjoy that side of my job, but don't lose sight of the power of creativity. And really, we're at a point now, and it might dovetail into another question, but we're at a point now where my next big thing is probably taking a leap of faith on something really creative that will disrupt again. And I can probably guarantee I won't be able to measure that. And it won't have data, it won't be data led, it will be insight led, it will be media innovation led, it will be something different. And having, I guess, a slightly strange conversation potentially with board, which unwinds some of the stuff that we put in place to say, I know I've sold in this data measurement efficiency piece, but this will be brilliant for the brand. I think that's going to be an interesting challenge, but also the right thing.
Goes back to that question around how to balance the creativity with the data piece. And I mean, it makes sense in my mind because I kind of see it as you need the data to give you sort of the baselines to see what is working, what isn't working. And that gives you some direction, because without that, you probably wouldn't be able to make that creative leap. So you do need that data there, and in a weird way, it has had an influence, because you try to sort of do that creative piece without the data piece and the learnings you've had so far, it'd be a shot in the dark, whereas this is, a shot in the right direction.
Bottom line is it was about confidence and trust in that I and the broader team knew what we were doing. So one of the things I still remember, one of the things that CEO said to me when I stepped into this role was, you need to know your numbers. And I think as a team, we've demonstrated that we do know our numbers now, and that gives us permission to be a little bit more creative.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's a real baseline.
It's amazing. Ian, It's been great having you on. Before I let you go, a couple of quick fire questions. What podcasts are you listening to right now or you would recommend?
Big fan of John Evans' Uncensored CMO. Always an interesting listen. Always take some ideas from that.
And what's your favourite fintech or financial services brand or app?
At the risk of sounding a little boring, I do tend to watch all of the banking ones. So the Monzos, Revolutes, Starlings. I love the new Monzo campaign. I think they've nailed that. Much as my son disagrees. But I mean, I recently opened a Starling account and it reminded me how slick that experience is and ultimately how much they've done in that UX space for the banking space.
And then last but not least, what's one thing that I haven't asked that perhaps should have?
I mean, you absolutely should have asked whether Stanley the dog does all those amazing stunts himself in the ads. I think that's
does he, or is it a lookalike?
Well, it's a healthy combination of more than one dog and CGI is the honest answer. But no, he was certainly well looked after. He's the star.
Amazing. Ian, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. Really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Good to talk.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk and make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.